Too angry.
What did I do wrong?
Nothing. Calm down.
No! Why are you leaving me if I didn't do anything wrong? I don't understand. I thought you liked me!
Too emotional.
You're wrong! My foot does let me, does! You're the problem.
Too dramatic.
Yes! This is the feeling! I'm alive! I'm still alive! This rush.
Too obsessive.
Almost perfect. One hair out of place.
Almost isn't good enough.
Too unstable.
Picture Milo! Swagger! Stop, Vander!
These are often the pejoratives used to describe these characters. You know, the psychotic female character, the mad woman archetype. Yet they're beloved in some of the most popular characters in fiction. I mean, Azula is a fan favorite with her own solo graphic novels. Pearl is a villain in the X trilogy that got her own film, which has the highest rating of the entire trilogy. And Harley Quinn, who was initially created as just a supporting character as Joker's henchwoman in Batman the Animated Series, has been around for over 30 years with her own comics, TV series, and even a live-action film. So what gives? Why do we love these characters despite their reputations? And what makes these characters different from their male counterparts? The answer is in the difference of narrative framing, aesthetics, and, of course, philosophy. But before I explain, I am so close to hitting 2,000 subscribers, so if you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and be sure to hype this video as it really helps the channel grow so I can continue making more. Now, back to the video. Now, just to be clear, when I refer to the psychotic woman archetype, I'm defining it as
a female character whose emotional destabilization becomes the narrative centerpiece. Not poorly written women, not female villains in general, and not mental illness as shorthand.
And to understand what makes this archetype unique, I'm going to compare Joker to Pearl. This is an apt comparison as both these films are character studies of a villain's descent into madness, who when pushed far enough, finally snaps. On the surface, they look formally similar, yet their differences are subtle but substantial. First, let's analyze Joker's breaking point. The infamous scene of Arthur on The Murray Show. At this point, Arthur has suffered, he's been tormented, and he's even killed. And right as he's about to break, let's listen to what he says.
Isn't that what they say? All of you, the system that knows so much, you decide what's right or wrong the same way that you decide what's funny or not. Oh, why is everybody so upset about these guys? If it was me dying on the sidewalk, you'd walk right over me. I pass you every day and you don't notice me. But these guys, what, because Thomas Wayne went and cried about them on TV?
Did you catch that? Arthur reframes his suffering as systematic. How society discards the vulnerable. How the powerful mock the weak. How the world is cruel to people like him. Joker externalizes his pain. Even though the story is about his mental unraveling, the climax converts his instability into indictment. His pain becomes political and the audience is invited to see Gotham as complicit. His breakdown becomes a thesis. Now let's look at Pearl's monologue. Likewise, Pearl has suffered, been tormented, and she has killed. But what does she say here?
I hate feeling like this. It's so pathetic. Do people like you ever feel this way? I figure you don't. You seem so perfect all the time. Lord must have been generous to you. He never answers any of my prayers. I don't know why. What did I do? What is wrong with me? I want what they have so badly. To be perfect. To be loved from as many people as possible to make up for all my time spent suffering.
Now you can probably see the difference. Pearl internalizes her pain. When Pearl confesses, she doesn't universalize. She doesn't blame the town. She doesn't condemn America, and she doesn't critique the war. Instead, she spirals inward. She's saying, I'm not a good person. I want to be loved. I resent my husband for leaving. I want to be special. I want to be perfect. Her suffering doesn't become ideology, it becomes exposure. There is no outward thesis about the world, only a desperate plea for validation. And that's the distinction here. Joker says the world made me this way. Pearl says something is wrong with me. Even if both statements are psychologically complex, narratively they land differently. One turns inward pain into outward critique, the other turns inward pain into self-revelation. Because even as Heath Ledger's Joker said,
It's not about money, it's about sending a message.
but let's do one more comparing Azula and Zuko from Avatar. Now, Zuko isn't a male version of this archetype, so he isn't a great comparison in that regard. He gets a redemption arc facing his internal turmoil, and his mental health actually gets better by the end of the series. But this is a good comparison because in-universe, Azula and Zuko have the same upbringing and face very similar problems, primarily trauma from their father. But yet again, Zuko gets to externalize his pain when he stands up to his father.
Growing up, we were taught that the Fire Nation was the greatest civilization in history. And somehow, the war was our way of sharing our greatness with the rest of the world. What an amazing lie that was. The people of the world are terrified by the Fire Nation. They don't see our greatness. They hate us. And we deserve it.
Azula, on the other hand, spirals inward.
I could sit here and complain how our mom liked Zuko more than me, but I don't really care. My own mother thought I was a monster.
Don't pretend to act proud. I know what you really think of me. You think I'm a monster.
Now you could just chalk this up to Zuko's redemption arc. He's a hero and thus faces his problems and grows from it, where Azula stays a villain and thus she must fall. But as we just saw with Joker, externalizing pain isn't an exclusive trait to heroes. This has more to do with her character's archetype. Once Azula begins her descent into madness, she exclusively internalizes. She believes she's a monster. Azula's breakdown in the mirror isn't really her facing her mother, it's her facing herself. An internal struggle that has manifested into delusion. And that's what makes the unique appeal of these characters distinct. They represent an internal battle, facilitating catharsis. Even when their actions have deep implications for the plot, the narrative focus is still on them. Jinx's Tea Party changes the world of Arcane, ushering in an era of war, but that scene is an identity crisis, choosing between Powder or Jinx. The final Agni Kai is Azula losing the one thing she respects, power, and confirms her worst fear of truly being an unlovable monster. Pearl's monologue is an admission of how flawed and imperfect she is. There's nothing wrong with raging against the external causes of our pain, and sometimes that's exactly what we want. But Azula, Pearl, and Jinx are all there when the pain turns inward. Now, this video couldn't be complete if I didn't mention aesthetics. Of course, many of these characters are attractive and are perhaps even meant to catch our gaze, but I think the draw extends past that. I'm talking about effective aesthetics. In the last section, we established that as the audience, we find comfort in pain that stays self-contained and intimate. But specifically, what about watching these breakdowns creates that feeling? I have 3 ideas. The first I'm calling the illusion of access. These character breakdowns feel like you're being let in on something private. Azula's descent happens in stolen moments, her hallucination of her mother, the agony beneath all that control finally raising to the surface. Pearl's unraveling is almost uncomfortably close, filmed in literal close-ups as we see her cry and choke on her words like we're watching someone come apart at the seams in real time. There's a level of intimacy to it all that feels like we're not supposed to be seeing any of this. It nearly feels voyeuristic, because as the audience, we're not just watching some villain lose, we're watching a person who never learned how to love finally run out of options. And this intimacy is structural, it's baked into the format. Take Harley Quinn for example. Both the comic and episode Mad Love builds us in her account of her origin story. We see her personal account of events through flashbacks. In the comic Harleen, we see this in real time, but we're literally reading her private thoughts as she loses herself. In the Harley Quinn show, it couldn't be more blunt as Harley's descent is explored through entering her mindscape. Of course, this is all deliberate on the part of the author, but it's the framing that we're getting exclusive access that maintains this illusion. The next idea I'm calling the legibility of pain. These characters' suffering is expressive in a way that feels emotionally coherent. Jinx's chaos makes sense once you understand her. It's readable. Midori is fascinating because her self-destruction isn't glamorized in the same way Jinx is, and it's not tragic in the same way Azula is. Yet it's the sincerity in her emptiness. Midori knows she's broken. She doesn't attempt to be strategic or morally complex like Yumiko. She doesn't desire power, control, or victory. She wants sensation, pain, fear, adrenaline, anything that makes her feel alive for even just a moment. It's such a raw, uncomfortable human trait when you strip away all the anime exaggeration. And that's the legibility of pain, the internal logic, the coherence that sparks the feeling of, I get her, that's driving the attachment. And finally, my last idea I'm calling the safety of containment. There's a reason these characters feel safe to love deeply. Their destruction doesn't spill outward. Yeah, Jinx blows up a building, but the emotional core of her arc is about her loss, not the casualties. As the audience, we're never asked to reckon with the collateral damage because the narrative keeps redirecting us back to her interior world, creating a kind of emotional permission slip. You can fully empathize with their pain, root for them, grieve for them, without the story ever making you uncomfortable about what their breakdown costs others. The containment is what makes the catharsis clean. So what does this say about us? We love the psychotic woman archetype because they give us emotional depth without the emotional risk. Their suffering is real enough to move us, contained enough not to threaten us, and painfully human enough to make us feel empathetic. The psychotic woman archetype endures not just because these characters are well written, though they often are, but because they offer something culturally convenient, emotional catharsis without systematic challenge. A woman in crisis who never asks you to change anything, just to feel. And perhaps that's the most earnest answer to why we love them. Because they let us. Thanks for watching. Peace.